Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this video we are going to study something more about functions. And as you see on your screens, it is written that functions are objects, right? So let us understand what we understand by functions as first class objects. Now everything in Python is an object, right? So those who are watching this video and are aware of object-oriented programming, the students that have studied C++, or Java, must be aware of the concept of OOPS, that is object-oriented programming, right? So that is a complete different paradigms of programming languages, in which we deal with the concept of classes. Now, classes is nothing but it is a logical grouping of data with methods, right? We have data and we have functions that data, or simply we can use methods to work on data. And class is just like a canopy and it contains both the functions and the data, right? So the data is known as the attributes, whereas the functions are known as methods in terms of object-oriented program, right? So the details of this we are going to discuss in the complete different series about OOPS in Python. But first of all, we need to understand that everything in Python, whether it is a list, whether it is a tuple, whether it is a string, everything in Python is an object, right? So in Python, functions are also treated as objects. It means that we can use functions as perfect objects. Now, whatever is the property of an object will be applied to your functions also. In fact, when we create a function, the Python interpreter itself creates an object, right? So now this will be a little bit overwhelming for those who are not aware of the concept of object-oriented programming. So you can also take it as, because everything in Python, including function, is an object, so functions and all other things that I'm talking about, such as list and tuple, will be able to have the properties of an object, right? So what are the properties of an object which are associated with functions and how it can increase its functionality? Let us study that first. So talking about, because functions are objects, it is possible to assign a function to a variable. You know that if I create a list, then I can name a list with the help of a variable, right? So similarly, we can also assign a function to a variable. Now this is we are going to see programmatically later in this video. Because functions are objects, it is possible to define one function inside the another function. That is, nesting of functions is also possible. As we have seen nesting of for loops, nesting of list tuples, etc., functions can also be nested. Because functions are class objects, it is possible to pass a function as a parameter to another function. And it is also possible that a function can return another function, right? So because they are objects, all these four way of programming is possible with functions, right? So let us visualize each of them one by one. Talking about the first thing, assigning a function to a variable. Here is a simple example on your screen. I have made a function f and just returned a simple string. The returned value of this function, when this function is called, it will be returning this string, and this return string will be stored in message. And if I print message over here, then this returned value will be print as it is. Now let us visualize this programmatically. So let me make a function named f, and inside that function I will be having a simple return statement which is returning a simple string, which is a concatenation of hello with a little space and world, right? So this should print hello world on your screens, right? Now what I'm going to do, because it is actually a message, so I have taken the variable name as message, and to that I have just called my function f. So when I make this function call, then this value is actually added to this variable, right? And if I print the value of message and run the code, you can see on your screen that hello world is printed. Similarly, it is actually working in a similar fashion as we actually assign anything to a variable and print its value. So it is that simple. The thing is that the value of a function is returned into a variable, and that variable can be used anyhow inside your code. The second point was we can also define a function inside a function. That is, nesting of functions is possible. Let us see this with the help of an example. What we have done over here, we have defined a function f, which is taking message as a parameter. Inside this function, we have defined another function, which is named as m over here. And the return value of this m, see the indentation, the return value of this m is nothing but hello with a space afterwards, right? So it is hello with a space, it is returning. Now you can see inside the outer function, I have taken just a variable and I have just called the inner function, right? And message over here. And I am returning answer, right? So when I called print with the outer function, what it is going to work? Anjali, that is this particular string, will be passed over here. That is MSG will be Anjali this time. When we called this particular statement, this m function will be called, and over here I will be getting hello with the space, and this msg is nothing but this particular value. So hello Anjali will be stored in this answer, and if I return this answer, then I will be getting the value hello Anjali, right? So let us see this programmatically and understand it in a better way. Here, let me just define a function which is having a parameter which is message. Inside it, I will be defining another function which is m, right? And m will be going to return a value which is nothing but a string hello, and it is your wish. Here I'm not using any concatenation operator. I have just given a space after this, right? Now I am coming out of this m function, right? So now I am out of this m function. You can see the indentation. Now this is inside f, right? What I'm going to do over here, I will be making a calculation. I will be making a string of my own. So m is going to return hello, right? So here I will be calling m. Remember, I am calling a function within a function, right? This m is function which is written inside f, and I'm calling f also, I'm calling m also inside f, right? Now after this I will be using over here message, right? And the next step, that is I will be returning answer, right? Now what I'm going to do is I will be printing the value of the first function f with a parameter Anjali, right? This is a string over here. Now if I run the code, you can see that hello Anjali is printed on your screen perfectly, right? Because when I called f, it has taken message as Anjali, right? This is the definition. Definition doesn't do anything. We need to call a function in order to execute it. So in answer, what I did, I called m, right? And with this I have used, because it is string, so I have used concatenation with this MSG, right? And this MSG has having value Anjali. And when I return this answer and just called it, hello Anjali is printed on your screen. Now one more thing which we actually wanted to know over here is, can we call, m also as it is? Is it possible? So if I run the code, you can see that we are having a error over here, which is a name error, and it says that m is not defined. See, if you want to call m, you have to call m inside the function, Otherwise, it is going to give you a named error because this is outside the scope of your function, right? So that is something which I wanted to tell you. The third property which functions acquire as object is that we can pass a function as a parameter to the another function, right? Let us see that also with the help of an example. Now on your screen, I have defined a function f which is taking one parameter and returning a simple string, right? We have also taken another function which is f2 which is returning world, right? And I have just printed f and f2 in a nested manner, right? So what it is actually this statement doing? What is this print statement is actually doing? Passing a function as a parameter to the another function. Now here f is my first function, right? And f2 is the parameter in the second function, right? So this m is actually acting as f2. So when I am actually using m over here, I'm just calling this second function, right? So let us see this programmatically and understand what is happening over here. First of all, I will be defining a function. Let it be my first function. So I'm naming it over here f1, right? What is this f1 is doing? This f1 will going to return something, right? And I am making a string over here, which is hello with a space, let it be. And I'm concatenating it with m, and I need this m. I do not have this m over here. So I want that when I call this function, I will be passing the value of m inside, right? So I've used m over here. Very fine, right? So let me just first run and call this function. So it is returning a value. So let me just use the print statement and use f1, which is my function name, and it needs the value of m. Now m I am taking as again Anjali, right? And if I run this code, you can see hello Anjali is printed, right? So what is this m? This m is the argument which is I am passing right here. So this, right? So this function is working very fine. Now let me just define a new function and let me call it f2. And in f2, what I'm going to do is I will be again returning a value, and that returned value will be, let's say, Anjali this time, right? Now, as in the previous example that I have used this hello Anjali, let me now just use the print statement. I want to print hello Anjali, so I am using F1, right? And in F1, previously what I did, I gave the name M as Anjali, the actual value, right? So M is the formal value and actual value was Anjali. Now this time F2 is what doing? What is F2 doing? F2 is returning Anjali, right? So here what I will be doing is I will be naming another function which is F2 inside a function. Now the inner function will be evaluated first. If we call this F2, this is going to return Anjali, right? So in place of F2, when this F2 will be called, it is going to converted into Anjali, right? And then as we have used in the previous section, f in brackets I gave the name Anjali, right? So this f1 will be working on Anjali and the value will be printed as it is this time also as the previous output, right? So you can actually pass a function as a parameter to the another function, and that will be working very fine as you simply pass any argument to your function, right? So that was all with this particular example. Let us look at the another property of object that is inhabited in functions. The fourth property is that a function can return another function, right? Now this is also very interesting thing in programming, that we can also return a function, right? Now this is a very interesting example. Here I have programmed two nested functions. The first is the f and the second one is f2, right? F2 is returning hello world as a string, right? And just pay attention to the return statement which says this f2. right? Now, what is this return F2 signifies over here, right? So this will return F2 out of the function F. Then it can be called by the variable name, which is message. Now, let us see this on our Visual Studio Code. So here, let me just define a function, and this time I'm going to name it F1 because it will be easy to understand, right? And then I will be defining a function, let's say the name F2, and F2 is going to return a string, right? And the return string will be as it is, that is hello, with a space, and this time I'm using it, and world, right? So it's pretty simple. Now what I'm going to do is in F1, I'm going to return the function F2, right? Which is very simple. And now I'm going to use a variable called message, and in that the function called with F, right? So this F will be executing and this will be returning F2, and F2 will again be executing and this will be assigned to your MSG. Now let me just print the answer to verify what I have just told you. So if I run the code, you can see that, okay, so this is F1 this time. I have used F, right? So that was an error from my side only. And now if I run the code, you can see that it is actually what it is doing. It is actually returning the location of F2. Now that is something unexpected, right? Now if I simply print message over here, what I got, rather than hello world, I got a location which is saying that this is the local function F2. See, F2 is a local function to F1, right? It is inside it. Global, which is outside the scope, everyone can use it, and local is confined scope, right? So it is local to F1 and it is located at this particular address. But where is hello world gone, right? So remember, in order to print hello world, now we will be using message variable as a function, right? So that is something really very important, and I wanted to show you this thing also. So when you called F1, it returned F2. That means this F2 is now MSG. That is something which is very important. Now F2 can be used by the name MSG. And in order to call it, you have to use parentheses because this is the trademark of a function, right? So whenever you use a function, you use these brackets, right? So now this will be acting as your function, which is nothing but F2. Now, if I now run this code, you got the answer as hello world. Now, this is something very interesting thing in Python programming, right? So if you do not use parenthesis, it will be acting as just an address reference. Otherwise, if you use the parenthesis, it will be acting as a function which is returned by the outer function, right? I hope that this explanation helps you to understand function a little deeper. And thanks for watching the video. And if you like the content, don't forget to subscribe my channel and share these videos. Thank you.